Call this Council and Budget Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present, your worship, with the exception of Councillor Zanko.
There are no announcements or addendum this evening. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There being none, and since this is a Council and Budget Committee meeting, I'm going to hand the chair over to you, Councillor McDermott.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Our first presentation tonight is from Craig Schupfeld of the Fort Erie Public Library. Mr. McCutcheon, are you going to open? Okay, come on up.
More specifically, how can we provide our communities quality of life? My name is Jerry McCutcheon, and I'm the current chair of the Fort Erie Public Library. And before I respond to my opening remarks, I'd like to thank a few people. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to our former chair, Mr. Larry Graber. He was a very, very effective leader. He was a man of integrity, and I considered him a mentor. I would also be remiss in my duties if I didn't thank a very, very important group of people. They are wonderful people, and they are called the Friends of the Library. They're like ambassadors for us. They go everywhere in the community. They promote our programs. They tell people what is going on. And also, they are excellent fundraisers for us. So we really thank them. And thirdly, obviously, no organization can thrive if you don't have a very effective and committed and dedicated group of staff. Whether it's people that you meet at the library itself or the people who are working in the background, they are all very effective workers, and they work as a team so well. And I'm always amazed by what's going on there. And I have to thank Craig and Maria for making that work so well. It's like a well-oiled machine. So, how does our library system affect our community's quality of life? Well, although our buildings are somewhat outmoded and in need of regular repair, we still offer our patrons a clean, bright, inviting, and definitely a safe environment. We have safeguards on our computers. We are continually culling our collections, which means that all of our information is current and effective for anybody who wants to do research. And also we have areas in all three branches where people can work in small groups or in larger groups. And of course, if somebody wants to sit in a nice quiet nook, we have that also. Intellectually, we have a variety of resources for enjoyment and research. In February alone, we're offering 30 activities, or 30 times that adults can come to our library for a scheduled workshop or another program, that reading program, for example. And those 30 programs only represent what we do for the adults. We also have tween programs going on, and we have children's programs going on. So in 1 month, we do a lot of things for all ages in our community. And that to me is very, very impressive. We have a seed library, genealogy resources, homework help, tax preparation services, computers for job hunting or writing of resumes, and many of our and a lot of people take advantage of our Chilton auto repair manuals also. We even have a spelling bee and a regular article in the newspaper every week. It's really a testament to our employees and our staff. We treat our patrons with dignity and an ever-present smile. All of our areas are wheelchair accessible. We have Braille signage in our book stacks, and we even offer interlibrary loans, which reduces the need for our patrons to have to always travel long distances. And I'll be speaking a little bit more about that later on. As a matter of fact, we even have an in-home service if that is required. Basically, the way I look at it in this day and age that is full of data and sometimes what is called questionable truths, our librarians are true gatekeepers of the truth and work so hard in finding people the proper resources that are reliable and that they can depend on, whether it's for individual satisfaction or for school research or other kinds of research. And seeing as this is a budget meeting, I guess I should get to my slides. And I'll just pull this out here. And if I'm not mistaken, if I push this, there you go. So I'm going to give you some of the highlights of what goes on at the library. As you can see, the first dollar amount basically relates to fines or fees or room rentals. The second amount, the $60,000 figure, well, that's from the government, as it states, and believe it or not, that amount has not gone up for over 20 years. There was talk of gradually increasing it, but with the new government, we have not heard a word yet. And the $6,600 amount is from the Healthy Kids Niagara initiative. We have been able to purchase, amongst other things, what are called big blue blocks. And every branch has a set of those blocks, and they are extremely, extremely popular with our patrons. Administration-wise, the filling of the coordinator position is a response to an employee who has been on long-term disability for 2 years. And the word LINC there stands for Libraries in Niagara Cooperative. And thanks to our CEO's efforts, we are part of an ever-growing library cooperative. Thurl was added this year, and there is a great interest from other Niagara area libraries. This really helps us keep our costs in check. Facilities-wise, the Adult Literacy Council used to be housed in the library, but they have moved, so we have put our boardroom where they were, and we now have an area where we're thinking of either making a quiet study area or even a maker space. And if you get to visit the Crystal Ridge Library, you'll see a very new looking teens area. And we have put some new furniture in there and made it much more attractive for those people to visit the library. And obviously, once we do one area, once that domino falls, we're looking forward to doing other things to improve the library also. We are part of a large partnership group, and we have in the past year, I think it is, joined with Brimstone, and we have what are called trivia nights there. And they occur on a regular basis, and they are extremely popular to a wide range of members of our community. And we hope that next year when we present this, there'll be even more names on that screen. Children's services. To give you some context, we increased the number of programs by 4% and saw a 13.5% increase in attendance. Our children and teen librarian, Karina Fass, has done an amazing job of creating a number of new fun and educational programs. Unfortunately, she has decided to pursue a teaching career and has left us. Her school outreach initiative was a great success as well. Those participating in our summer reading program increased from 478 to 615. And of course, the number of titles soared to 6,630, which compared to 4,034 last year is a great sign. By the way, this is on the left. You can see that Carissa is there, and I wish I could show you a picture of all of our staff because they're wonderful people also. And if I'm not mistaken, on the right, that's one of the groups that she was working with. Adult services. If I may expand on a comment I made earlier, our proudest achievement this year has been the introduction of reciprocal borrowing with area libraries. It doesn't hurt that our CEO, Craig, is chair of that group. Our patrons can now borrow items from public libraries in Pelham, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Lincoln, Thorold, as well as Niagara College. In August, we formalized an agreement with Niagara Falls and Welland libraries that allow residents of Fort Erie to get cards from either of those libraries without paying a fee. What an advantage this is to our community. We intensified our efforts to visit multiple nursing homes on a regular basis, and for some residents, we are part of their regular routine. We are committed to further expanding this service in the new year. We have a population of about 30,000, and almost 1/3 of those are registered library members. I think a lot of people like to do a reading in Fort Erie. The numbers don't represent the reading areas that we have at the Leisureplex and at the Crystal Ridge Arena. Many people visit. We have reading areas there, and people can sit down and read. And we've even had feedback from people from out of our town that come to use the facilities and thank us so much for having those services there. And actually, we have to replace all those books basically on an annual basis because they get so used up. The left, I'm going to have a few images for you. The left image is an opportunity for you to look at the big blue blocks that I was speaking about. And on the right-hand side, we have a booth set up at the Ridge Fest. But I have to tell you that that booth is set up before the people arrived for the Ridge Fest. Also here, we have a group of adults participating in a workshop called Build Your Own Terrarium. And on the right-hand side, we have Laura Trabucco, and Laura is our communications librarian, and she goes to various places, and again promotes the programs that are going on. The one on the left is again obviously a painting workshop, and the darker image on the right is a group of people participating in our trivia night at Brimstone. Our annual circulation saw a dip in 2017, but we're happy that we had a 2% increase in 2018. Our outreach and workshops have had some impact on these numbers, and let's not forget that in the 20th century, we're seeing a new kind of patron, one who comes to us for a place to meet, a place to work, or even a place to attend workshops. It's becoming like an Italian piazza, that's the way I put it. Our quarterly circulation definitely in our third quarter shows a sharp increase. And that is our summertime programs and our summertime reading programs. And obviously it doesn't hurt that we offer a nice air-conditioned environment for them to go to. Centennial is obviously our main distributor of resources. And however, we do pay very close attention to housing trends in our area, because these will no doubt be a factor in the distribution of resources in the future. Digitally, we offer all kinds of e-books and CDs and everything else that you want, up to almost 40,000 items per year are taken out of the library. Now, I happen to be one of those who likes the old technology, and I like to have a book in my hands, so I do that too. We cannot predict what the future holds as far as libraries are concerned, but this trend will no doubt have an impact on how our buildings are used and how they're going to be structured. So does our library have an impact on the quality of life for our community? I'm somewhat biased, but I would say yes. I have left some cards with Melissa, and they are invitation cards for you. I'd like you to drop by any of our branches. Speak to our librarians. Speak to the patrons. And I'm sure if you do that, you will find that you will have a renewed enthusiasm for what goes on in our library system. We also have a professional website, and we thank Mike for that. So in that vein, I will leave it, and I will let Craig do the hard part.
They do the hard part. Thanks, Jerry. Your worship, members of council, thanks for having us here tonight. Jerry did thank the people sitting behind me. I'll do the same again. Thank one of my staff members who's out here, board reps, and members of Friends of the Fort Erie Public Library for coming here tonight. So I'll get started. This is my 8th budget that I've presented here, which is, I was thinking about earlier, which is getting kind of frightening, just how quickly it's gone. So it's interesting. So the first slide, and I've probably shown this slide 8 times because it's the same one, never change it. And I always refer to this as what we consider pretty much our fixed costs for the year. I mean, we could look at, you could cut staff wages and benefits, certainly if you're cutting staff. But with our complement of staff and with our existing facilities, these are the costs that we have each year that make up the majority. Staff wages is probably 70%, 71% of our overall expenditures. Janitorial contract is done through the town. We are seeing some increases in preventative maintenance, again, age of the buildings. Carissa, who did an amazing job with children's programs, also introduced a lot of programs that made bigger messes. So we're doing a lot more in the way of cleaning, carpet cleaning, taking care of the building, especially the carpets and even some of the exterior, just trying to keep the building looking good. So the next 2 slides speak to some of our goals and objectives for the next year, 12 to 18 months. The first one is the completion of major capital projects. I did submit a supplemental operational request that covers that, and I'll speak to those a little more later. Again, Carissa did an amazing job increasing partnerships with local schools. Whoever comes in next will be expected to continue that trend. That has been very significant. Jerry mentioned libraries going not necessarily in a different direction. We're certainly going to continue to have books and DVDs and whatever the new materials might be. But partnerships with the schools, with the nursing homes, with other groups in our community are critical going forward. It's a big point of our existence. Over the last few years, we've gathered a large number of what I would consider maker items. When I talk about those, I'm talking about we have a milling machine, we have a vinyl cutter, we've got several robotic kits where kids can use the robotic programs to code. They can code and make the robots move. We've got circuit kits, we've got other electronic kits, we've got really advanced, they're almost like Lego, they're like super Lego kits for kids. The issue is we have them, but we don't utilize them nearly enough. So one of our challenges for the next year, once we figure out what's going to happen as far as any renovations at Centennial, we'll be creating a dedicated makerspace so that these cool toys and things can be used by the public. Maybe not all the time we're open, but certainly make them more accessible than they are right now. And the other one that's a big one for me is measuring library effectiveness through outcomes. What I mean by that is every year we come here, we talk about how many people came to the library, and it's impressive numbers, and we have a lot of people from the community using the library. But I don't think that we can measure how effective we're being just through how many books went out the door. So we're trying to measure more of the impact we're having on people. And actually, because I always get stuck doing the really dry budget part of the presentation, I've actually started collecting a few of these from kids and parents in the homework help program, as well as some people, older patrons. Generally 65 is probably the youngest, who are taking our adult computer basics class. So I was just going to share, if that's okay, I'm just going to read. I've got one from a student in the homework help, one from a parent, and then one from a computer user. They're very quick. I'll read through them. Again, since I always get the dry part, I thought I was going to take this piece from Jerry tonight. So we asked, how often do you come to the after-school program? The child said almost every Monday to Friday. Favorite things to do here: hang out, help kids, play games, and meet new people. What do you think of the library? These are the questions that I like. It's fun, lots of things to do, a good spot to hang out with friends and read books. The people in the library are kind and nice. And said, going to homework helps me. And this I thought, this is why I chose this one. It says, do my homework and control my anger, get calm so I can help people. So we can see we're actually, helping a child who apparently has challenges. And I love homework help because I get to make new friends and I get to help people with finding activities to do. So. And I got one from a parent. Again, how often? My 3 children go every day. Their favorite things to do are hang out with their friends, dance, do arts and crafts. What do you think of the library? This sounds like a really basic answer. It keeps my children safe and off the streets, but I can tell you that's really important, especially I can say at the Centennial branch. We have a lot of that. We are kind of a safe haven for some of these kids. Going to homework helps me, and she said Janine, that's just Janine Warren who runs the program, does a great job. Helps my daughter with her homework and is very understanding and patient with the children. And I love homework help because my daughter gets one-on-one help, so she understands the work that needs to be done, which is great. And I should say for the homework help program, if the kids don't have homework, they are still welcome at the program. We will get out some games, some activities, again, some of those little robotic kits to do. Sometimes it gets a little bit out of hand. I've heard of basketball being bounced in there a few times, which I can't take. I'll have to draw the line at that, but it can be, again, it's not just homework help, it's like an after-school program for some of these kids. And again, we did this computer basics survey for some of these patrons, and I'm not going to read this whole thing, but one of the questions just said, after attending the class, do you have a better understanding of the ways the library can help you? And he just said, it's certainly nice to know the library is teaching this old guy some use of technology. I welcome more. Laura has been very understanding and helpful. And they're all like this. And it's so good to see, right? And everybody said the class should be longer. So, again, that's something we're going to make more of an effort for this year. If you really wanted to get deep into outcomes, you could measure where a kid's at before a program and after a program. I don't know if we have the time or expertise to do that. But certainly I think more of these storytelling approaches will be used. So now getting into the budget. Excuse me, our grant request this year, operating grant, is $1,530,264, a 2% increase or slightly over $30,000. We are also making a request for development charges in the amount of $45,000, which I believe is the first time in, I want to say, 7 years. Mr. Jansen would likely sound, okay, yeah, sounds about right. Our supplementary revenue, there's similar numbers to what Jerry spoke to earlier. He did mention the $60,682. The previous provincial government had a plan to roll out a 100% increase over a 3-year period. When they were voted out, the new government, obviously everybody's aware, they're kind of examining things line by line. So it's disappointing in that we didn't get an increase. At the same time, a lot of programs have been slashed. So on the other hand, I'm somewhat happy that we at least are getting what we were getting before. Certainly I'd like to see that increase, but it could have been worse. This is a 3-year snapshot of our expected requests. You can see 2% this year. We already said 2.7 next year, 2.3 in 2021. Same caveat I always give. Don't hold me to the 2.7. I'm sure it will go up or down based on our needs and town direction. And again, I believe last year when we presented 2019 was closer to 3% than it was to 2%. But through the use of development charges and you know, trying to run an efficient budget, we were able to come in at 2%. I always talk about material spending because it's something when I first came here, it was down around the 10% mark, which is somewhat standard in libraries, 10 to 15, but we always aim to go higher. You can see we've been taking some small steps here. And again, because of the use of development charges, that will allow us to jump up. That number would be 12.5%, which is significantly higher than we've seen in past years. And that's of our overall expenditures. The next few slides talk about comparing our library funding and some of our operational challenges as compared to other libraries in the region. And this is something that really came about from a request, actually, I believe it was Councillor Schuler many years ago, asked to talk a little bit more about this. So the first slide, as you can see, total operating funding per capita for 2017, which is the most recent year for which I could find. In raw dollars, we are second highest next to Pelham. I like to show this because I think sometimes there's maybe a belief that we aren't getting financial support or the libraries aren't getting financial support. We're doing quite well in terms of raw dollars as compared to some others in our region. And again, libraries of similar size. I didn't look at St. Catharines or the Falls as much. So here's where the challenge comes. We are well funded. At the same time, we're also offering 133 hours of service per week, significantly more. Lincoln, second place, they're at 112. Nobody else is above 80. Pelham's at exactly 80. So you can see with that money, we are trying to operate significantly more hours than most libraries. And this kind of ties them all together, operating cost per hour of service. And again, you can see that Pelham and Lincoln are the only ones who are lower than us. And what's interesting is that Grimsby, Port Colborne, and Thorold all have 1 service point. Pelham and Lincoln have 2 service points, and we have 3. So it's not surprising. I mean, we're actually doing really well, considering that we have 3 service points. And I can tell you from other experience, the more service points you have, the harder it is to keep that number down, just because you always need a body at every service point. So I would say we're very happy with the support we've received, and I think we're using it very efficiently. Just a snapshot of essentially our bank statement at the end of December 31st, 2018. Our operating account is slightly over $25,000. The operating reserve account, that's something we'd planned to do a year ago. We never had the funds. And again, I've got proposed because if you looked at our bank statement on December 31st, you would say, oh, you've got $80,000 in the bank. You can move that $50,000 over. But January rolls around, and all of our contracts pretty much come due in January. All of the processing for all of the materials that we receive is in January. Any of the electronic databases, downloadable books, downloadable magazines, everything digital, everything is in January. So cash flow is not good in January. So the $50,000 will be there, it exists. But if I didn't include it, I feel like I would have been misleading that the money exists even if it's not in the account on this date. And then our capital account, as predicted, is right around $230,000. So getting back to our capital reserve, I talked a little bit about this earlier. Biggest project on this list is the new service desk and additional public space at Centennial Branch. Right now, for anybody who's been in there, you know we've got a enormous service desk. Probably takes up about well over 500 square feet, maybe 600 square feet. And that space could be better utilized for tables, for some kind of seating, public use. We could move shelves out, put more booth seating or more quiet space near the front windows. Certainly we could use better use of space. The shelving at Stevensville and the Indigenous collection are carryovers. Again, we've been holding off on those until we decided what was going to happen with the Centennial branch. Patron-friendly seating at all branches. This one needs to happen this year. I was out just spending time at Crystal Ridge a couple of days last week. It's in bad need of it, and I know that Stevensville is in the same condition. And the other big one here, and you'll see on the next slide when I talk about the renovations, is the children's area at the Centennial branch. And I'll get to that again. And the security gates are kind of it's just going to happen. If we move the desk at Centennial, we need new security gates. The ones there are outdated. And when we do those, we'll do the ones at Crystal Ridge as well. So I believe everybody received the document I'd sent a couple of weeks ago about our supplementary requests. So these numbers, I'm sure you're familiar with, you've seen them. This was a breakdown, and I'll give a little bit of history just for those who aren't aware. We did a planning programs and services study 2 to 3 years ago. Community input. I know some people sitting here talked to them. I know that some other people at Town Hall talked to them, staff and our board. And that was done by a consultant and an architectural firm. So since it was an architectural firm, the recommendation was obviously build a new building that they would gladly build for us, right? Knowing that was not likely to be happening, we then contracted with a design firm out of St. Catharines who came in, looked at the Centennial branch, came up with designs and drawings. I then worked with Randy Martins at the town to put together an RFP, went out to tender. The successful bidder came back in the $450,000 range for everything that we wanted to do, which was surprisingly high to me, but not completely. Having been through a few building projects, I know that's how it goes. So you can see here, again, the children's area is the most expensive. And just to give a little background on why that would be is that there will be not only new carpeting, but we'll be doing like a textured ceiling with lots of colors, some more creative shelving, making it more of a kid-friendly area. And if you're familiar, again, with Centennial Branch with my office, I've got windows facing on the library. That wall would be replaced, and we would be building a children's story wall. That would be a very colorful wall. It would actually have some seating for the kids on the wall. It would be, so it's really the centerpiece of the children's area, and maybe of the whole library when you walk in. And then the reception area, collaborative space and lounge. Just to explain again, you're looking at, with all of this, pretty much the whole first half of the Centennial Branch, public space being done. So from the atrium, the glassed area, all the way to the front, everything would be being done. So, and I'm sorry, it's cutting off the amount at the bottom, but if you add this up, it was $452,000. We talked as a board and felt that, again, we've got $230,000 approximately in our reserve account. If we're asking for funding, then we should be putting some of our own. It's the point of having our reserve. So $115,000 is what we agreed on, which takes about half of our reserve. Certainly if there's overages, I would expect that we would be able to cover those with what we have. The reason we didn't go any higher than $115,000 in terms of our contribution is that, as you saw in the couple of slides previous, we do have other capital projects that we would like to complete, and furniture especially is extremely expensive. And there's also items that come up for which you're not necessarily planning. An example is when we did the DSS study, before we could start construction or renovations, they found asbestos in the old meeting room that had to be abated. So there's $11,000 gone that you had not even considered as part of your budget. Thankfully, over the years, we have been quite efficient, always with our reserve, not spending unnecessarily. So we have been able to cover a lot of these expenses over that time. I'm just thinking about even my time here. We've spent a lot without having to come, with one big exception a couple of years ago. So that's pretty much it for my presentation. Again, thank you for your worship, members of council, and everybody who's here. And certainly, if anybody has questions, comments, I'll remain up here.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you. Comments or questions? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Greg. When your counterpart was speaking with respect to annual circulation and the number of people that come into the various libraries throughout the municipality, is that based on the number of books that are checked out then? Because you had mentioned.
Yes, the circulation, I believe our circulation was 180,000. The number of visitors was in the 170s. We have door counters that we use for those. So, I mean, so again, measuring unique visitors is next to impossible, but yeah.
Okay, and I just wanted to make one comment. I was lucky enough to participate in a couple of things that Karina Fast had put together. And one was the Star Wars Day, and the kids were off their rockers when, you know, the lightsaber was there and she had some activities. So it was really exciting to see that. And I challenge people who don't visit the library to come and see some of those things, because it is truly amazing what you've been doing there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Noyes.
McDermott, thank you for your presentation. Going to your report, you lost me when you said you can make code, but that's just a joke. Some humor in there. On page 5 of our report, it talks about the study, and I think you were referring to it. Focus of Centennial Branch. The study conducted that a new library branch be built, and recommendations were also made regarding improvements to the existing public space. Now, is this still somewhere in the works that you're considering a new library branch?
Through the chair, that decision's likely beyond. I mean, if you said, do you want a new library branch, we're building it for you, I would say yes. But certainly I think that decision's likely going to be made up here more than, so this is why I don't know how feasible it would be in the near future, which is why I don't want to say settled on, but why we decided on, if that's not going to happen, then let's at least look at these renovations.
If I can continue. Thank you for that. I know that you and I talked many years ago, probably about 6 or 7, and I think there was a rumor running around at that point, and I think you had mentioned, and I'm trying to put words in it, that if there was a new branch, it would probably be more like a virtual branch with the IT and the technology and stuff going. I would imagine that would probably be the direction.
I think, through the chair, if we were going to build a new branch, we'd probably have a physical branch. Hypothetically, say it was being built not on the north end, but somewhere else in Fort Erie. There would likely be a building, a physical building, and maybe the existing one would become smaller and be more of that virtual branch. I know that some libraries have gone to staffless branches for certain ones, you know, just monitored by security cameras, even with books and materials, which is interesting.
Further question? In regards to when you're talking about capital improvements, and I'm all for the library, and all for your recommendations, so I'm not trying to nitpick here, but since I live in Stevensville, there was a talk here about capital improvements. You have not made major improvements in over 40 years for Centennial. Then you mentioned Crystal Ridge, but you never mentioned Stevensville.
Through the chair, it was on the one slide, I believe the shelving at Stevensville is one, and that's one that bothers me. I know that Stevensville, as with really both of our, especially Centennial and Stevensville, we do have a lot of older patrons. They're tall shelves, and the bottom shelves are low, so they're either reaching too high or reaching too low. And that's a concern of mine, and the shelves are too close together you could fit a wheelchair through there very uncomfortably. So shelving at Stevensville is a big priority once we have figured out what's happening. And they would also benefit from the furniture that we would be doing at all of the branches.
Thank you. One further question. In regards to the number of hours that you display, the service hours, does that reflect just staff time, or are volunteer hours also included in that number?
That would all be staff time. We certainly have library volunteers, but any time that we are open to the public would absolutely require staff.
Thank you.
Are there any other further questions? Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on what Councillor Noyes was asking with respect to a new build, someone, and I had mentioned to you earlier, but someone had brought to my attention that they used to go to a library that was built into an aquatic center, and the aquatic center was year-round. So I wondered if that would be something that you would like to entertain in the future, since we're looking at a possible aquatic center in the future for Fort Erie.
Sure, through the chair. Speaking for myself, I don't want to speak for the board. I would be very enthusiastic for any kind of multi-use facility. Now, I'm sure the board would feel the same. It was just actually, my daughter had a hockey game in Oakville. We were at Glen Abbey Rec Center, and Glen Abbey actually has a library with an aquatic center and 2 rinks. You know, I know that Pelham's just built a multi-use facility. When I was at Fort McMurray, we had hockey, library, curling, field houses, swimming. I think that seems to be the trend. And I know that some libraries, Calgary as an example, will do almost, when they build new now, it's almost exclusively a multi-use. Some even with a high school. I saw one Calgary in the south end that was library, YMCA, high school combination. So, yeah, I think that. I don't like the word synergy, but I think you are creating those. Really, you're creating that space. People happen to be at one, they take advantage of the other. They can make one trip and go to 3 places, whatever. It's great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Schufeld and Mr. McCutcheon, for your presentation. I had a few questions, and I wanted to start with the provincial grant. That number 60,000 looks terribly familiar. How long has it been at 60,000?
Through the chair, probably 25 to 30 years. Yes, yeah.
I was afraid.
I'm sure you remember that number from your days. Yeah.
I was on the library board in the late 80s.
Exactly.
I think it was around 60,000.
Yeah.
That's really quite disgraceful. The province wouldn't be. There's nothing we can do about that. But it's really unfortunate, considering literacy is so important to our society. You had mentioned the Friends of the Library, and do they do fundraising that assists you at all with respect to your financial needs?
Are you talking specifically about a current project?
Well, are they making a commitment with respect to the renovations to these?
Yes, and again, I don't know how much money they currently have in their accounts. But that money has been, I guess we are tentatively waiting to see what would happen with the children's area. Their intention last year when we started talking about this was to dedicate some funds towards it.
Okay. And with respect to the DC request, I wasn't quite sure that I understood that. So you've made a request for some of the money that we have received in terms of development charges, and that'll be utilized for
collections only, collections, new collections, and
on the premise that additional materials are required because the population is growing.
Exactly. Yeah, they're very stringent on how those charges can be used. And again, Mr. Jansen and I've asked many questions over the last few months to make sure I'm doing it properly.
You had referred to in one of the slides some reserves. I don't know if you could turn to that slide or not.
Yeah, for sure.
So the operating reserve, that's money that comes from where?
That operating reserve, and again, I understand nobody's going to remember, but we actually had planned to do that in 2018 to create an operating reserve. That was part of our plan. We didn't have the funds or the cash flow during the year to do so, so it's carried over. But it would come from, when I looked at my bank statement as of December 31st, we had $80,000 in the bank. And some of that was supposed to go to operating reserve. So that's where it will come from, is from the operations account.
So what's the distinction between the operating first item and the item below that?
The operating reserve was intended by the board, and this was going back again a couple of years, to be used on the occasions where we would go over in spending, especially on a certain area where we might run short. Instead of transferring funds in our budget like we've done in past years, we've had a transfer from reserve at the beginning of the year. Instead of accounting for it that way, they wanted to have an operating reserve where that money was there in case we did go over. With, again, some of it is just not wanting to have to come back to the town if we are going over in our operations.
Okay, just so that I'm clear on this, you've got $80,000 in a bank account.
As of December 31st.
Okay. And is any of that $80,000 in either of the top two items there? Or
That is the top two items. Yeah, that's it.
total? So it's not quite 80.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And does any of that arise from a surplus in 2018?
Probably $20,000. $20,000 of it would have, yeah.
All right. So you could set up your operating reserve fund with $50,000 and still have 25 left over.
Yes.
Could that be allocated to the capital project?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, if that was certainly.
Why it wouldn't be?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just asking.
No, again, the operating reserve, the intention of the board was to have that for a purpose. But certainly, again, I don't want to speak for the board, but if the town said, if you said, we'll give you this money with the understanding that we expect you to use this, the $115,000 you talked about plus this $50,000. Certainly, I mean, again.
Talking about the 50.
Okay.
Talking about the top number.
Yeah, I would certainly say, from my perspective, there's no reason why it could not.
You'd still have the $50,000 operating reserve, which you had explained is helpful to have when you roll over from one year to the next. But you could be utilizing some of that operating. That would mean your contribution to the capital project would be around $140,000.
Yeah,
as an example.
yeah, 115 plus 25. Yeah.
That'd be something that you'd be comfortable with recommending to the board.
Oh, certainly yes.
Okay. And at one time, I could be wrong on this, but one time I thought there was some discussion about the possibility of either phasing this capital project in or having it span 2 years. Was I thinking of another project?
I don't believe that there has been any discussion on the length of this one. It was just we're presenting it for this year. For the larger question, how it would span over 2 years, is it possible? I would think so. It would just require discussions with the successful bidder on the project and then factoring in associated rising costs for the second year of the project.
So if I might, Mr. Chair, ideally, if this was approved, though, you'd be doing this project during the course of 2019.
Yes.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Schufelt.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, number one, thanks for being here tonight. I'd like to congratulate the board on everything that they do. They just keep getting better and better each and every term. You do a lot of work with having so many libraries in town, and you're a catalyst for literacy and learning, and your programs, I have to say, are very diverse in the sense that you have a good following of adults as well as your children's programs, which are probably second to none anywhere in Niagara region. The other outstanding thing is I would like to recognize the Friends of the Fort Erie Library Board. You can't go anywhere in this community without seeing them raise money for you. And Anne McLaughlin and that group of wonderful people, you're so lucky to have them. That's basically.
I agree with that.
So I guess you're done tonight.
All right, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So when the mayor returns, we'll move on to the EDTC, the budget.
one from the region. So this is
Okay, so all the technical difficulties are dealt with, and we'd like to welcome Carolee Grummett to come and talk to us about the EDTC budget.
I'm not Carolee Grummett, Councillor McDermott. I'll be beginning the presentation this evening. Your Worship, members of council, senior staff. I was going to say residents, but there aren't any here. businesses of Fort Erie, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege as chair of the Fort Erie Economic Development and Tourism Corporation that I provide this introduction to our 2019 budget presentation. I'd first like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our board and staff members, some of which are present this evening. We have with us our treasurer, Wayne Nelson, two council representatives, one of which I understand is on holiday, Councillor Zanko and Councillor Marina Butler. We have also with us our Special Projects Administrator, Ricky O'Kane, Kirsty McKay, our Junior Economic Development Officer and Executive Assistant, Carol Lee Grummett, who's our Acting Economic Development Officer and new General Manager. The EDTC was created by the Council of the Town of Fort Erie as a standalone corporation. It was established under its own incorporation, off-site from the town hall, so it could be a valuable economic development tool and do such things as assist business in retention, expansion, and to pursue business attraction, with the goal of creating an environment in Fort Erie conducive to businesses creating jobs and increasing the tax base. We have been encouraged by every council to provide advice and counsel on relevant development policies and issues, and to advocate for the business community and to encourage businesses to be comfortable in expressing concepts, issues, plans, etc., and other business and property confidentiality until such time as they were ready to proceed into the regulatory realm of the town of Fort Erie and its departments and associated agencies. Over the last 18 years, the EDTC has had many notable highlights, which include such things as accessing $3.6 million from the province for Rich Products expansion for their par-baked manufacturing lines, the startup of Fleet Canada after Fleet Aerospace closed down, recovering the contaminated Eagle casting site in Stevensville through the attraction of Peninsula Alloy, attracting Zavcor Trucking, which has since expanded and spun off a second logistics agency called Truck King, the attraction of DMI Industries, a wind turbine tower company from North Dakota, to fill the facility that was vacated by Ronal Corporation, again out in Stevensville. Subsequently, after 5 years, that company closed, and we helped to attract CMI Heavy Industries, who now occupy and manufacture at that site. The creation of the Fort Erie Live Racing Consortium and taking over management of the racetrack under threatened closure and successfully running it since 2010. The allocation of the Niagara Foreign Trade Zone Office to Fort Erie. More recently, assisting Picard Peanuts to establish in Fort Erie on Concession Road, and assisting in the establishment of the new Primary Care Niagara Urgent Care Center at Garrison Square. As well, we provide for extensive and effective networking with provincial and regional agencies, extensive and experienced research networks with our industrialists and developers. We completely understand that sometimes the ratepayers and residents may not understand what goes on at the EDTC because matters dealt with are often business confidential. Our clients are the new businesses we attract to town and local businesses who need our help and advice in resolving problems accessing expansion lands, or help with the processes to expand, market, and export their products, often very sensitive and very confidential issues. However, we do provide transparency and accountability to Fort Erie Council, and thus the ratepayers, through its 2-member directors on the EDTC board, as well as through our annual report to full council, like this evening, as well as our fully audited annual financial statement. We are here to serve Fort Erie. On behalf of the Fort Erie Economic Development and Tourism Corporation, I'd like to thank you for your continued support and this opportunity to speak to you. I now call on our General Manager, Carol Lee Grummett, to present our 2019 budget submission.
Thank you, Rick. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, staff. I am pleased to have the opportunity to present the EDTC's budget to you this evening, which will include the EDTC strategic priorities, 2018 highlights, initiatives planned for 2019, and the 2019 budget submission. The EDTC has been in operation for 26 years. We foster an environment in the town of Fort Erie conducive to business, industry, tourism sectors through job creation and economic prosperity. The EDTC establishes strategic priorities and objectives. I'd like to quickly highlight some of the priorities and objectives for you. The first is to grow and retain business. This is accomplished through business expansion and business retention. The business expansion priority is working with local businesses to grow and expand facilities, product lines, and business opportunities through expansion process support by attending pre-consultations, assisting with the regulatory processes, research and advising on applicable funding opportunities, grants, and incentives, identifying key partners and local resources, providing market research, letters of support, and brokering relationships. Under business retention, the EDTC provides similar services as described under business expansion, but often in an expedited and urgent manner through business case development, due diligence support, media message management, advocating for business through local, regional, and provincial policies, and government lobbying. The second strategic priority is to grow and retain business. This is accomplished by assisting with the identification of local and new business opportunities, leads, and trends, providing research and data on job trends, skill requirements, labor market information, and by working with our regional, provincial, and federal agencies on employment trends and potential opportunities. The third is business attraction and new investment opportunities. We work to attract new investment opportunities through our partnerships with the Niagara Development Corridor Partnership, the Niagara Economic Development at the Niagara Region, the Niagara Foreign Trade Zone, and Team Niagara. Local support by business-to-business peer group development and professional development opportunities, encouraging and maintaining relationships with local and commercial realtors. We also generate opportunities by participating in inbound and outbound trade missions and participating in Niagara delegations to consulate and trade offices. New opportunities are also created by networking with economic development and business development stakeholders, local government contacts, and educational partners. The fourth strategic priority is capacity building with municipal, regional, provincial, and federal, local, and business community partners. The fifth strategic priority is to promote and build Fort Erie's profile outside of the community through sectoral marketing. The EDTC's products and programs are designed to coordinate a message to external markets, including tourism, business attraction, and government. We will also work with stakeholder groups to develop organizational capacity to better promote and market tourism opportunities in and around Fort Erie. The sixth strategic priority is to support developers and investors through the build process. The EDTC provides services throughout the entire development and investment continuum. The EDTC is a communication and bridge support between the town, businesses, and investors in an effort to make our Fort Erie development approach effective, timely, and more competitive than other site location alternatives. We will work closely with town staff on issues identification and management. Lastly, the next slide focuses on the operation and administration of the EDTC, including its administrative responsibilities of the Niagara Development Corridor Partnership and also the Niagara Foreign Trade Zone. I'd now like to address select highlights from 2018. Rick did touch on a few. Business expansion. Abatement Technologies is located on High Street in Fort Erie and began as Harbor Manufacturing. The EDTC worked with Abatement on site information and investment-ready site options for expansion opportunities. The EDTC also supported their application to the Southwestern Ontario Development Fund, which resulted in new investment in technologies and led to the creation of 15 new jobs. Truck King Logistics has been in operation for 23 years. The EDTC supported their efforts through Natural Resources Canada to become the first carrier in Ontario to run specialized heavy tractors on compressed natural gas instead of diesel. Truck King has invested $1 million in a CNG card lock station on site at Pettit Road. Envoy Energy is new to Fort Erie. They're headquartered out of Milton. The EDTC assisted Envoy with site location analysis and land acquisition on Bowen Road. Envoy is working in partnership with Truck King to build a large retail CNG gas station on Bowen Road, which will be the first of its kind in Ontario. This is a $3 million investment. Business attraction. The EDTC was involved with the startup of Canacure Corporation in the former Pharmedics building on Jarvis Street, the new Gilmore Lodge long-term care facility, Greenstone Structural Solutions, which celebrated their grand opening this past July, the opening of the Niagara Foreign Trade Zone in May, Picard's Peanuts, who we've been working with since 2017, and they will be holding their grand opening in the next few weeks. 644 Garrison Road, which is the former Red Star property. There's a large retail and commercial development planned for that site. And most recently, the Primary Care Niagara Urgent Care and Family Group Practice, which will be opening on March 4th. Capacity building. This slide describes some of the capacity building initiatives and marketing and tourism initiatives. Of particular note, the EDTC sits on the Industry Advisory Committee for the Walker Advanced Manufacturing Innovation Center at Niagara College. We've also sit on the Niagara Entrepreneur of the Year Awards Committee. We were involved with the Niagara Industrial Trade Show Association. Some of the marketing and tourism initiatives included the Fort Erie Visitors Guide, our new Fort Erie Because Lifestyle magazine, our incremental marketing program that we have for the BIAs. We were engaged with all 3 BIAs in 2018 and so forth. As we move into 2019, proposed initiatives for the board to consider in the near future include coordinating plant tours in which the mayor and council will be invited to attend, increasing Fort Erie's awareness and investment readiness by developing a comprehensive community profile and new website. We will also be looking at ways to increase stakeholder and community engagement through an online survey and a business retention and expansion outreach program. This will allow us to get a better pulse of the business community and determine ways in which the EDTC can better service their needs. And it will also be an opportunity to build relationships and friendships with our local businesses, which will hopefully lead to greater synergy and cross-investment opportunities amongst our local businesses. We will be providing confidential quarterly reports to council, and we'll also be looking to possibly partner with the Small Business Enterprise Center for a pilot program to offer services and programs to support our small businesses. Lastly, I'd like to walk you through the EDTC 2019 budget submission. It's a long document, so I just have to switch gears here. So the EDTC used a budget increase of 2.2% pursuant to the Town of Fort Erie 2019 budget guidelines. In addition, the EDTC budget submission includes the 2018 approved budget, actuals, and a reconciliation of internally restricted reserves. It also includes the 2020 budget forecast. The EDTC budget is separated into two categories, the administrative operational budget and the program budget. Under the administrative budget, I'll draw your attention to wages and benefits. In 2018, the EDTC incurred an increase in wages and benefits as the result of a human resource matter resulting in a budget deficit of $403,000. In 2018, the EDTC operated with 3 full-time staff and 1 contract staff, which was the bookkeeper. The 2019 wages and benefits expense is expected to be $265,000. We are currently operating with 2 full-time staff and 2 contract staff. The goal is to be operating with 3 full-time staff by May or June of this year. In the 2020 budget forecast for wages and benefits, the expense is expected to be $304,000, which will see the EDTC operating with normal staffing levels for the entire year. The difference between the wages and benefits from 2018 and 2020 is related to staff salary grids. I will now address significant variances in the 2018 administrative budget using a threshold of anything over or under $5,000, starting with accounting and legal. The EDTC incurred an increase in accounting and legal expenses as a result of the HR matter, which resulted in a budget deficit of $5,400. Capital asset expense, the EDTC purchased a new laptop and Surface Pro computer, which was not budgeted for and resulted in a $5,700 budget deficit. Rent, the EDTC budgeted $53,000 for 2018. We received a rent reimbursement from the Niagara Foreign Trade Zone, resulting in a budget surplus of $17,000. The rent reimbursement for 2019 from the NFTZ will be $18,000. This leads us to a total 2018 administrative budget of $507,000. The year-to-date actuals were $918,000, resulting in a budget deficit of $410,000. The 2019 administrative request is $391,000, and the 2020 budget forecast is $428,000. Next is the program budget, which reflects the strategic priorities of the EDTC highlighted earlier in the presentation. The total program budget for 2018 was $157,000. Year-to-date actual was $158,000, resulting in a variance of $1,300. There are a couple of variances under the 2018 program budget that I'd like to point out. The Fort Erie Gazette, this is a 16-page news supplemental that had no advertising and featured good news stories on Fort Erie. The EDTC released this in September and circulated approximately 13,000 copies to Fort Erie residents through the local paper. The Fort Erie Gazette expenses increased from the 2017 estimate due to an increase in printing costs, design and layout, and an overrun of an additional 1,500 copies for distribution to businesses, developers, and new residents. This resulted in a $4,000 budget deficit. The Fort Erie Visitors Guide, we incurred a cost savings due to lower distribution costs, resulting in a surplus of $4,300. Moving to 2019, the 2019 total budget request for program and administrative dollars is $503,000, plus a one-time funding request of $176,000 to replenish the deficit from 2018 for a total budget request of $679,000. On that same note, the EDTC reserves are now depleted, resulting in a request under the 2020 budget of $125,000 to replenish the emergency marketing fund. The 2020 budget forecast is $694,631. And I think with that, we'll conclude our presentation here and move to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Curly. Are there any budget-related questions? Councilor Norris.
Thank you, Councilor McDermott. I have a few budget and questions. In regards to the accomplishments and the achievements that you listed and the costs associated with doing them, which of these could not have been accomplished if you were in-house?
I didn't get her.
Through you, the chair, can you please repeat the question? Sorry, I couldn't.
You listed a number of accomplishments and achievements over the last little while, the last several years. Which of these could not have been accomplished if you were in-house?
Through you, the chair, they all could have been accomplished if we were in-house, but there are some confidentiality surrounding some of the development and expansion opportunities. But to answer your question, they could have all been dealt with if we were in-house, yes.
If I can continue, you have, you and I have talked on the phone the other day. We were talking about the Gazette and the Visitor Guide, and that is 2 publications of 3 that you've gotten out in the last year. I know this year, Fort Erie, or you've changed the name, is not happening this year. It's happening every other year. But is there a need for 2 publications every year?
Through you, the chair, just to clarify, so the Gazette is a supplemental newsletter that goes out. We do that on a biannual basis to update residents, business owners on good news stories in Fort Erie. The Fort Erie is the lifestyle magazine, now renamed Fort Erie because it's a lifestyle magazine. It's a lure piece for residents, businesses that are looking to come here. The last time we did that magazine was about 10 years ago. So the expected shelf life of this magazine is about 5 years. And the Visitor's Guide is something that we do on an annual basis.
Are the costs not reflected in this, though? For the Gazette and for, I know that the Fort Erie Visitor's Guide is in there, and then I think...
Yes, they are all reflected. So if we move to the 2018 approved budget, about 6 line items up, there's the Fort Erie expense of $50,000.
But that's not going to be repeated this year?
That's correct.
Okay. In regards to staffing and things, how many other municipalities, like you were here and you watched the library, they give us a comparison about the number of staff hours and things that they do in regards to the population. They also gave us I think it was a bar chart in regards to various, like how they compare the amount of money they get compared to other municipalities of the same size. Can you provide that information?
Through you, the chair, that's something that we can prepare and I can circulate to all of council. But I should note, in Niagara, we are the only external model of economic development.
I would be interested in knowing how much money each other municipality of the same size. I'm not talking about, I know Niagara Falls has that fee for tourists or whatever, that they have a pretty big pot that they can go into. Now, in regards to the 403 projected variance, that's for 2018, right?
Yes.
Why should we, and I know down the road you're asking for 125, you're asking for us to help you replenish. Basically, that money reflects all your reserves, which are now gone, plus you're now in a deficit position. So you're asking council to eventually pick up that, give you money to cover those costs that you're now in debt for.
That's correct. And for 2020, it's just a budget forecast. So you can see the operational costs are $569,000, and we forecasted that we will be asking for the replenishment of the emergency marketing reserve in 2020, yes.
If it's an emergency marketing reserve, is that the money you used for the HR?
I'll defer that question to Mr. Gorm.
The money used out of reserves was from unrestricted reserves held by the Economic Development and Tourism Corporation.
So have you ever had a money marketing reserve?
Yes, we've had
And how much is in that account now?
nothing.
It's completely
It's
depleted.
completely, the reserves are completely depleted.
And where did they go this year?
They went into HR resource issues.
Okay, and how, so you can just move over money marketing reserves into?
If it's unrestricted, yes, we can.
So are we talking about the same dollars then, the unrestricted and the money marketing reserve being one and the same thing? Just two
Part
different
of.
things? Okay. If you're a standalone corporation, and I know that, I want to call you Counselor Gorham, old school Counselor Gorham, I was going to say, Mr. Gorham, if you were a standalone organization, why should the taxpayers of Fort Erie, who basically provided the dollars in this unrestricted reserve or the marketing reserve, come to your, but why should we be replenishing that? We were not asked, we were not included in the discussion of that expenditure.
It's part of our legal responsibilities moving forward under wages and administration. It's just as simple as that.
And I think and if I could continue, I think the key word there is your responsibility. I don't see this as a town responsibility.
That's your words.
No, you actually said that. You said it was our responsibility, so
It's a responsibility of the corporation.
okay. I probably will have more questions later, but I'll let others, get enough.
Councilor Rivers.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is, I need a little more explanation on this human resources matter. Are you telling me that, well, we all know that your general manager was terminated in December, right? So it looks to me like he got a $403,000 or somewhere around $400,000 in his severance package.
That's a private and confidential human resources issue, and it's subject to non-disclosure, and we will not talk anything about that issue this evening.
All right, well, I'm glad you won't talk about the human resource issue, but you're not denying that your general manager was terminated. Now, last year, I asked Mr. T-Bear about monies that was donated to the Live Racing Consortium. And he basically said, Councilor Luberts, you have to understand, the board of the EDTC and the board of the Live Racing Consortium are the same people. Is that correct still? Or as of December of last year?
We're not here to talk about Fort Erie Live Racing Consortium. We're here to talk about the Fort Erie Economic Development and Tourism Corporation.
Yes, I understand that.
You want to ask that question of the chairman.
Mr. Gorham, I'm just asking about your board, the EDTC board. Is it the same board as the
Point of order, Chair.
Councilor Butler.
Point of order, Chair. This is no relevancy to the EDTC presentation that's at hand tonight, so I ask that you direct the councillor to direct questions that are specific to the matter that's at hand this evening.
I thought I had when I started.
Mr. Chair, I'm leading to the question about what we're being presented with, and we were presented with a budget request here, and in the budget request there is regards to a human resource manner. So I'd like to ask a few questions about the human resource manner. Now, the board of directors.
Mr. Chair, just to further that, the questions that he was asking was direct with respect to board of directors being on board of directors on another committee, which has no relevance here this evening.
That's correct.
Well,
So
Mr. Chair.
let's just stick with the budget. That's what we're here for tonight. So
All right.
let's carry on.
So you used that money to settle up a human resource, and it was a decision of that board of directors, right, to settle up a human resource manner, and I think we all know that the general manager was terminated. And that's what your deficit is all about with your human resources. Am I correct?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
So, now.
we're in deficit because of human resources
That
issues.
was a decision of the board of directors. Now, that very same board of directors, that very same group of people that terminated Mr. T-Bear, right, hired him to be the manager at the Live Racing Consortium. Now, I've
Point
been.
of order, Mr. Chair. Can you please direct council
Yes, well,
to stay focused on what's before us this evening?
yes.
I have one question I have to ask. But Councilor Roberts,
Yes.
I think you have to stick with what we're trying to do here tonight, and that is this budget. I think all this other stuff, we have the Fort Erie Live Racing Consortium, we have no skin in the game, so that is really not a council concern at this point.
All right.
Anything with regards to the budget, you're more than welcome to hit at, but aside from that, I don't want to have to call you out of order, but this is
All right,
just
thank-
constant.
All
So
right,
let's get
thank
with it.
you. Thank you very much. But I can continue on with the decisions of the board of directors, am I correct?
Quite honestly, I'd rather have you deal with the budget, and that is what we're here for tonight.
Well, we have a
So-
budget item here of a deficit.
Yeah,
in
I've
our
heard that
human
already.
resource.
So we're
So-
very aware.
It's part of the budget, is it not? Let's get
Can you
John
or
to
can
work.
you not stick with the budget?
Well,
You've asked this question
Mr.
3 or
Chair,
4 times.
I'm
up-
asking-
wait a minute. You've asked the same question 3 or 4 times in a row.
no,
Yes, you have.
no, I haven't.
So, yeah, you have.
No, I haven't.
I'm not going to argue with you anymore.
All right.
Stay focused.
Okay, all right, so we'll move on to the termination of your member.
Again.
We are not talking
we're not
about
talking
that.
about the termination, and you know it.
It's
So
part
let's
of-
stop it.
Mayor, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
We're moving
it's
on.
part of-
Anybody else have any
it's part
questions?
of the budget. I have a number here,
Excuse
a
me?
human resource manager.
Excuse me?
I have a number here that they are showing in
And-
their budget.
And they've told you,
And I
the
can't
question
ask
has been,
questions about
the
it?
question has been answered.
Okay, gentlemen,
Tell 'em,
gentlemen,
look,
look at,
You're obligated
Counselor
under the MOA
Luberts,
to set this
you've
budget
been
and
told
do
that
it.
the
We're outta
EDTC
here.
cannot
This is
discuss
bullshit.
the particulars of the HR matter because it's confidential and there's a non-disclosure. Do you understand that? You understand that?
I understand that.
Okay, so there are some things that you can ask about the budget. It relates to the EDTC, not the Live Racing Consortium, not anything that these folks can't talk about because of a non-confidentiality agreement. But if you want to talk about things in the budget, by all means, you're at liberty to do that.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop, and thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think I'll wait for now, and I'll ask some questions. I think I got my point across to the general public, and that's what I want to do, is make sure that they understand what it is that we're being asked to do tonight.
Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to stay away from anything that's confidential or that you can't talk about. But I did provide each of you with a package of a series of budgets and draft budgets going back to last year. And the purpose of them is to highlight what appear to be inconsistencies with respect to what we've received in the past in terms of the 6 major areas that you have requested funding for, and to this most recent budget, which again does appear to be somewhat inconsistent. I definitely don't fault that, Mr. Chair, on the new general manager. She was an employee. She's now in charge, and I must say that there does appear to be at least clearer effort to identify which items go in under which headings. So I thank you for that, Ms. Grummett. And I don't know whether you had a chance to look at these or not.
No.
So the predicament that I've got is in the budget that we have before us this evening, well, not in this particular, I guess it is, yeah. If you just move, you can move that closer to the top. Who's got control of that? Melissa, do you have control of this? Carly, could you move maybe closer to the top of the budget this year? So that along the left-hand column, there are a series of numbers. If I might, Mr. Chair, do these numbers have some significance? They appear to be code numbers.
Go ahead.
Through the chair to you, Your Worship, they are our GL, our general ledger numbers.
Okay. And what's the significance of those?
It's just like an account number, so we know where to post the expense to.
So every time, going on the basis of what I understand to be the way this would work, every time a check is issued, it would have a code or would be assigned to one of these various codes?
Yes.
So at the time the check is written, whoever authorizes the writing of the check would provide that information to the bookkeeper or whoever issues the check?
All checks require a purchase order, so with every check there, it's supported by a purchase order identifying which account the expense is to go to.
So then it would be a simple matter of assigning each check that's written, if I might, Mr. Chair, to the particular heading.
Correct.
So I believe that, if I might, Mr. Chair, that recently there was an effort to try to better realign some of the expenses that have been incurred, because some of the other documents that I've included are draft budgets leading up to now, and the budget that you've presented. So if I could, Mr. Chair, can you help me with how the items that were previously allocated to a specific code now end up in a different coded area?
They don't really, it's just the expense that's represented.
So, through you, the chair, Your Worship, there was a reallocation of program dollars that was approved by the board. So some of the priorities changed, and I guess that's part of being the board has the flexibility to make those reallocations, so that's what was done. The total program amount remained the same, but the expense in each category, there was a reallocation, but the total number of the program dollars remained the same.
If I may, Your Worship.
Of course.
Like every corporation, we strike a budget, and a budget is an estimate. And every corporation operates under the understanding that it does have the flexibility to move dollars around within its global budget to account for emergencies, to account for shifts in priority, to account for new projects. And that's why you're seeing the differences.
May I continue, Mr. Chair? So if you look at page 1 of the bundle that I provided to you, that comes from last year's 2017 annual report and 2018 budget plan. And the blue column in the middle of the page is the proposed budget. And it has the 6 areas of, I guess, 6 areas of importance which are identified. And I should have thought, and maybe you can correct me on this, but council would have approved this budget on the premise that you would be allocating $43,000 to grow and retain business, $20,240 to grow and retain job opportunities, etc. If you look at the hand-printed notations to the left of that blue column, you'll see essentially what was in the 2017 budget and what the actuals for 2017 were. So that there was a significant variance from a number of those categories. Was council requested for approval to alter any of those allocations within those headings?
No.
So then, back to the current budget, which I was on the board at the time we started the budget deliberations, and there were some changes with respect to, as I said, the allocations. So if one looks at page 5 as an example, which I think was the last iteration prior to the finalization of the budget. The categories, the 6 categories, which show 2018 budget adjusted and then year to date, those numbers don't, just looking at the budget adjusted, which is column A in each of the draft budget, page 5, and the one that's presented now, page 6, those numbers don't match up on all fours. So I'm presuming then that there were some changes between then and now. And I wonder how that would have come about, Mr. Chair. What's the explanation for that?
Through you, the chair. So there was a reallocation of funding, and this just did go to the board for their approval within the last few weeks to reallocate some of those expenses to different priorities.
Okay. And I know that when I was on the board, that was something that was discussed.
Yes.
Yes.
So in terms of the purchase orders that you've mentioned accompany each check, would the allocation code number have been altered on some of those purchase orders in order to arrive at the final budget allocation with respect to 2018?
Yes, they would be changed.
And the check, is there a check register?
I would think.
Yes, I believe so.
I would think so.
Which would be the ledger which would contain all of the checks?
Yes.
And I presume, if I might, Mr. Chair, that would include the date the check was issued, the amount of the check, who the check was issued to, and the code to which it was allocated.
Yes.
And the purchase order number.
Okay. I'd be interested in seeing that. Is there any reason why that can't be made available to council?
Yes, we can prepare that for you. So are you just looking for 2018?
Yes, just 2018. So will that check register have any alterations in terms of the codes? Or would that just be on the purchase orders?
No, it should be on the register.
Looking at the register now, would one be able to see the original allocation and
No.
the current allocation?
I wouldn't think so. I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'll have to check with our bookkeeper.
Okay, well, that would be fine. That would be a start. But I'd be interested in knowing the original allocation
Okay,
and then the current allocation
okay.
in the check register if that's available. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
No further questions, sir, Your Worship? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. The other councillors don't have any questions. All these papers to keep tossing around. Mr. Gorham, you talked about transparency in your presentation, and you indicated that you had 2 councillors. In your introduction, you were talking about the EDTC and its transparency, and you said that part of that transparency is reflected in having 2 councillors.
Absolutely.
On your board. Where was the transparency when the decision to take dollars instead of the slots? Where was the transparency with their?
That has nothing to do with the council of the town of Fort Erie. That is a Fort Erie Live Racing Consortium issue and their issue alone.
Well, you can keep saying that, and I'll move on.
Excuse me.
Okay, so in your budget, and again, I did talk to Carolee earlier about this, you have Fort Erie Gaming Industry Campaign. Can we talk about that?
Absolutely. It's something we participate in every year in support of gaming across Fort Erie.
Yes, and I understand, if I can continue, that in that is included the Horsemen's Benevolent. Actually, maybe Carolee, could you give us a list of what's included in the Fort Erie Industry Campaign?
Sure. So it's a provincial grant through the Ontario Tourism Marketing Partnership Corporation, and contribute to the program, including the EDTC, the Fort Erie Live Racing Consortium, the Horsemen's Benevolent Protection Association, the Thoroughbred Improvement Program, OLG, and the Niagara Development Corridor Partnership. And so all of those funds, all of those stakeholders contribute to the program, and the funds are administered through the EDTC for that program.
And do we have a list of where those funds were expended?
Yes, I can provide you with a reconciliation. So it's just a flow through. So because we're the external corporation, we're able to apply to that program on behalf of the stakeholders, and the stakeholders submit the money and we just flow through the money, and I can provide you with the full reconciliation of where all those funds go and the full campaign program dollars, yes.
Very, very much appreciated. Under your growth and I'm trying to look here. You were talking about internal leads and generations and lobbying, and you have $15,000 there for the 2018. Could you explain, and I know you've explained it to me on the phone, what that entailed, where those dollars went?
Sure, through you, the chair, to Councillor Noyes. For the internal leads, some of the expenditures were on sponsorships and attendance at Chamber of Commerce events, the Niagara Industrial Association trade show, the Southern Tier Mayors Luncheon, the State of the Region, Embrace Greatness, etc. For the external leads, that included sponsorship and partnership with the Ontario Aerospace Council, attendance at the Economic Summit, Niagara Foreign Trade Zone Seminar, which was held in Fort Erie, partnerships with the Canadian-American Border Trade Alliance, etc.
Thank you for that. I don't know if this is where Mayor Redikoff was going, but in regarding asking for more information on the purchase orders and things like that, have you ever completed, or not you particularly, but has EDTC ever completed a compliance audit?
For what reason?
Basically, so it would be clear that when you provide a budget to the town and you're saying you're going to spend X amount of dollars on A, that at the end of the day, we know if you spent X amount of dollars on A.
For as long as I've been on the Economic Development and Tourism Corporation, Councillor, you have received an audited statement by our auditors every year.
Again, more information than the basic thing is what I'm asking for. Is
More
compliance.
information as to what?
Well,
It tells you what we spent our money on and reconciles it.
well, you can be argumentative if you'd like, but you talked
I'm not
about-
being argumentative, I'm being factual, Counselor.
You talked about reallocation of program dollars. And I think Mayor Redikoff was making, at least left me with the impression that the reallocation of program dollars was not as clear and transparent for us to be able to understand. So there lies my question for compliance audits. My understanding of compliance audit says, okay, if you're gonna spend it on A and you didn't spend it on A, you spent it on B, then we find out that the money wasn't spent on A, it was spent on B instead. And therefore, we would have more information on past dollars that were spent. And I guess the reason is that as we're moving forward, how can we prevent this from this reallocation of program dollars? Because like I say, you're an independent corporation, so we give you another, I'm rounding it up, $700,000. How do we know you're a private organization that you're going to not reallocate the money to different programs or different sources, or not sources, but things that we haven't discussed that aren't in your list? How do we know that?
Go ahead.
If I may.
Carolee.
So that's going to be part of the purpose of the confidential reports, quarterly reports to council that the board decides to do, then we will notify council through our reports to you.
And I really do appreciate the fact that we will be getting quarterly reports, and from what I understand from your response is that any reallocation of dollars will be made aware. You know, if you're not spending it on A, you're spending it on B, and then we'll know why. I think that's it for my questions. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, just a couple of questions. Just to go back to the allocation for 2019 with respect to the Port Erie gaming industry campaign, is that still a go?
So we've had recent discussions that we're not sure if the province is going to be funding that program this year. And so it's looking like those funds may be freed up. And if that's the case, we should know in the coming weeks. If that's the case, then we'll be coming forward with recommendations to the board on where to reallocate those funds. And then council will be informed in the April quarterly report.
I might further, Mr. Chair. So this budget represented, according to the report that we have, a 2.2% increase over last year.
Yes.
Okay, and I know that the chair may not agree with me on that. Chair may not agree with me on this. I'm looking at this as termination year budget, which according to the MOA says it would be the same dollars as last year, plus the obligation to fund the legal obligations, which you've made reference to.
That includes
Yeah.
that obligation,
Yeah,
worships.
Yeah. No, I understand that, and so I appreciate that. So I want to thank you, and I want to express optimism now that Ms. Grummett is at the helm, and I think that it's been so far a good accounting exercise. So thank you very much.
Councilor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On that note, I'd like to thank you for your presentation as well. It was very well put together and disseminated to us. So thank you for that. And I really want to express my my gratitude to the responsible and new direction that you're going to be taking us in, and the fact that we're going to be receiving those quarterly reports I think are meaningful. I like where you're going with your strategy, so I'm looking forward to working with you for the next 4 years. Thank you very much.
Councilor?
Thank you, Councilor McDermott. Thank you, Carolee, for your presentation. There was a lot of asks tonight, and the budget is coming forward for our approval. When can we expect the answers to our questions?
I will work to get them to you in a timely manner, hopefully within the next week, week and a half.
Very much appreciate if you can.
Always a pleasure. And I'm glad that I'm very happy with this budget, by the way. It's a lot more detailed than the last ones. I think you got a good start, and appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go to reports. Could I get a mover for CBC for 2019, Your Worship? Any comments or questions? Your Worship?
Just for clarification, so if we were proposing to move any type of amendment, should we just wait until this comes back as part of the operating budget, or should we be trying to deal with that tonight?
I think that would take place when we're doing the levy.
Okay, that would be fine, because in my mind, I'm thinking that there's an additional $25,000 that the library can allocate towards their capital projects. I'm quite content that we cover the balance of those renovations and that we do it this year. I just can't say enough about the library. It provides a tremendous service to probably more people in the community than any other service that we provide, other than the roads, the water, and the sewer.
I think you're right on the mark with that. It's probably easier to do it then, because when we move on to the other one, I think we're going to be getting information back, and it's going to be helpful to us to make those decisions. So any other comments or questions with regards to that? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Do I have a mover for Councillor Butler, CBC 05-2019 Economic Development Operating Budget? Comments or questions? Your Worship.
So just on the same point, I'm thinking that I like the presentation. I definitely like the direction. I like the new atmosphere. And however, we did move to terminate this current MOA. I've committed to trying to assist in putting together potential terms for possible new MOA while we're going through the process of looking at the best way to deliver services. So I'm still thinking that it should be no increase over last year. I think there's probably going to be money available in that budget in any event, because I don't think that gaming program is going to be going forward. So just kind of give everybody a heads up of what's in my mind. But I will support the budget subject to that in all likelihood.
Councillor Nice.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. I know that there are things that we cannot change, even if we wish we could, although I'm very happy with, how to say, the increased transparency in this budget and the more information. I am still questioning how past monies were spent, and not to say that those mistakes are going to be repeated, but I do think that their ability, or the organization's ability to move money at the direction of the board is concerning. And I would like to, I don't know if we can work that into the budget, in the memorandum of understanding that if you say you're going to spend it on A, you spend it on A, and if something happens, there's an emergency or something, you come back to us. We don't find out later on that the reserves have been spent on an HR matter.
And I agree with you. And I think what, if I know His Worship's talking right now, but maybe he can work that into the work that he's doing behind the scenes, and I'm sure he can. So the MOU and the idea of transparency, and when you budget something, if you're going to change it, to come to council and ask for certain things. So I trust in his leadership to get that done. Councilor Luberts?
Yes, thank you very much. Just out of curiosity, we're looking at, and we've decided that this would be the termination year, and we're looking at a new MOA, and but they're requesting, I guess that maybe this will come up when the budget is there for the increase to 2%. I don't know that we would bring that up now, or that comes up when the actual budget's there. And then, yes. And I'm just wondering, with the termination year being there, what is it that the EDTC might not be doing because they're in the termination year now? If we give them a budget of last year, right, and I think the mayor touched on it, there might be things that they won't be doing because the fact that they're in a, they're going to be winding down. So some of their programs they won't take on. Now I understand there might be some obligations that they have, you know, with lease and all the other stuff, but if we could get some kind of a report from the EDTC on how they were gonna, what kind of monies will be available for them and what kind of monies aren't going to be spent on budget items that were projected or that they were looking at for 2019.
I think the mayor might give you some enlightenment here. Your worship?
Well, right now, they're authorized to work until the end of this year on the basis of what our interpretation of the termination provision in the MOA is. So that even if we were to go through the exercise of reviewing the delivery of economic development services, there's going to be a transition. And we're going to be approving a budget based on certain monies being spent on these particular headings. And that's what I would expect would happen, so that I don't see there being any savings before the end of the year, because I see this as being part of a transition either to a new MOA with, excuse me, that would carry into the future with an arm's length corporation, or some other type of conclusion that this would still be money that would be spent for economic development purposes. So I don't necessarily see any savings coming from this budget once it's approved.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I don't know if we're going to be terminating, maybe Mr. Jansen can chime in a little bit. If we're going to be terminating an agreement with a separate corporation, right, and creating a new MOA, then wouldn't it not be more prudent not to carry over from one to the other and start fresh? And maybe Mr. Jansen can chime in on this, because wouldn't it be more prudent for us to terminate, clean house, and start fresh financially as well, instead of carrying over from one corporation to another?
Mr. Jansen?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Luberts. If you're asking whether or not there's savings to be had within a termination year, I think that would be our expectation of their board, and that's a good follow-up question as well for an advance of the next meeting. But I would suspect most of their programming and commitments would be largely the same. The protection we have with, or the nature of the memorandum, is that we limit the amount to that. So certainly if there are areas they would propose, I would think that would have already been contemplated and included here. But that is something to ask them.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Jonathan. I'm not so much looking at the savings aspect. I'm just looking at the cleanliness of it all, right? They clean up, they unwind, as a corporation, and then we enter into a new MOA or a new delivery of economic development in the town, and a clean slate. That way, we're not carrying over any. There's, you know, I'm just thinking that it's a lot cleaner that way. I'm not talking about savings. I'm just talking about a cleaner way. Isn't that better even when we're doing it, you know, on our books?
Just to follow up on that, I would say that that is part of the nature as well of the governance model that that was decided at the meeting related to termination. So I would say at this point it'd be a bit premature to know which would be the best way, and that certainly that study will help determine that.
Well, we can discuss that at the budget time. Councilor Mr. Cookett would like.
Yeah, if I could just jump in briefly. I think it's good to give council an update of where we stand. The direction that was given to me was to hire a consultant to review the governance model. So I've initiated that. I've hired a consultant, and actually I've met with them today. We did provide a scope of work, an RFP to them that outlines exactly what I'd like to see done, what they should review. So today we've provided them with a lot of information, be it reports, their bylaws, and so forth. We provided them with a list of stakeholders that they should be talking to, and in that conversation as well as the various options that they should be looking at. And off the top of my head, there's 4 that I can think of, but is termination of EDTC altogether, status quo, have EDTC as a standalone corporation, move them in as a department of the town hall, or a hybrid of one of those. Now, I left it with the consultant to come up with various other options, but whatever they recommend, they will recommend how to move forward with the preferred option. And if that means eliminating the corporationing and starting new, then they will advise us as such.
Councillor Nice.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. Just when hearing Councillor Lupert's concerns, I'm wondering, since we are going to be getting quarterly reports, I'm wondering, and perhaps Mr. Jansen can weigh in on this, is that I'm not sure how we give them their $700,000 a year. I don't know if it's one check that we give them on whatever, let's say May 1st, maybe May 1st, and then we give them a check for $700. I'm just wondering, because I don't know if the memorandum of understanding says that. I think we are restricted to having to match the dollars, but I'm wondering, since we're going to be getting quarterly reports, I'm wondering that can we not release the money quarterly? In other words, okay, for the first quarter we give them 250, well, I guess what's 1 quarter of 700,000, and we release the money quarterly based on their expense. So in other words, if the quarter comes in higher, then obviously we would, and for all the right reasons, we would give them more, as opposed to giving them one check for 700,000. Could we break it up to match their quarterly reports?
Mr. Jansen?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Noyes. Our practice is to pay the EDTC quarterly in advance based on the budget. So at this point, in the absence of approved budget, our practice has been to pay them based on last year. Going forward, if council should wish to pay them something other than that, certainly the budget is our guide for that. But if there are other identified changes that are coordinated, then we would respond to that.
Okay, just in case I'm understanding this wrong, my understanding is that that is how we pay them quarterly now? Like we release a quarter, okay. So basically I have 2 great minds, right?
Yes, it's paid quarterly in advance.
Councillor Dublin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to echo some of the same sentiment that had been expressed earlier about being pleased with the direction that things are going. I certainly I look at this budget here, and it's broken down, you know, by grouping, and it seems fairly straightforward and fairly comprehensive. I do know back when we were discussing the the termination of the MOA, that I was concerned about the ability of the EDTC to continue performing if they were put in this situation, and I'm pleased that they are still moving forward, that they're still providing services to the town. I'm very happy that that's happened, and I'm very pleased to see the direction that things are going. And just to talk about the consultant's report, I'm certainly very interested to see how that turns out. But going forward, I think we're, you know, in a good place. I think we're moving forward in a positive direction, and I'm very happy to see that.
So, are we ready to vote on this report? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Worship.
So the date of the next meeting is Tuesday, March the 5th. That's when we'll be considering the general levy operating budget and assessment analysis. And if we can't get it done then, we'll have a meeting on March the 20th. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Luberts. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried.